Hey, it's Vass here from Aussie Playground, and welcome to another episode of RC Pit Stop. In today's episode, I'm going to be showing you how I solder up my XT150 connectors. Now, when I get a new battery and it comes with plugs that I don't use, such as this one here, and I intend to use it on my 1/8 scales, I swap them out to XT150s. Now, I've done a video in the past about XT150s and why I've decided to go for these particular plugs, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it here. But I know that a lot of you out there have actually swapped out to these connectors, and there's even been a few of you that have contacted me asking, what order do these go in? How do I solder them on? What's the best way to do it? And of course, I've been swapping out a lot of batteries, and I've got a little bit of experience, and I've got a bit of a knack on how I do it, and how it works really well for me. So I figured, hey, why not share this with some of you out there? Now, I do want to put a disclaimer up front before we even get started on any of this, that this is just how I do it. I'm not saying that this is how you should do it. This is just how I do it. I'm just showing you my methods. I didn't go to school for any of this. I didn't do any training for any of this. It's just been trial and error, and from watching other people and sort of getting advice from other people that have, do some soldering themselves, and I've come up with my own method. So before you jump in the comments and crucify me for using something that you don't use or doing something that you don't do, just bear in mind that this is just how I do it. Okay, so obviously you're going to need a battery, or if you're going to be swapping out an ESC, you'll need that. However, the plugs for the ESC are different, because the way I've done mine is the small sleeve on like the smaller sleeve connectors will always have the female, and the larger sleeve connectors will always have the male. Okay, so it's just a matter of which one goes with what, on the ESC or the battery. So for the batteries, I use them like this. Large black one goes with the battery, and the small red one goes with the battery, just like that. Okay, so the end product here's one I've done for you earlier, should look like this. Okay, that's the end product. So before we get started, I'm going to show you some of the tools that you will need to get the job done. Obviously, to cut the wires, there are many different tools that you can use out there to cut your wires. I like to use these ones because they have a little channel just here where you can put your wire in, and then you just squeeze down and bang, you get a really nice clean cut. And I've been using these for a while now, and they've been working very well. To strip the wires, I actually got this one recently. I picked it up from Hobby King. The little cutter up the top here, you can sort of use it to cut wires, but it doesn't open wide enough. So I use it mainly just for like zip ties, or maybe even little wires. That's really what I use it for. But down the back here, this is where the exciting part comes in, to kind of strip your wires. As you squeeze, all right, you use it as a normal cutter like that, but then if you squeeze a little bit more, it kind of opens up like so. And if you can see the way that actually works there, how it kind of grabs and pulls the wire and strips it clean. And I've been using this for a little while, and actually it's a really cool tool. I'll see if I've got a link if I find a link for it, I'll put it in the description for you. That way you can go grab yourself one of those as well. Now, a lot of people will use jigs, for example, to hold their connectors. And recently I got this guy here, Mr. Jig from Hobby King, and it's a really nice, square piece, machined aluminium, very nicely finished. However, I did have a couple of little problems with it, and I'm going to show you here quickly. So here is my connector, my XT150 connector. Too big for these guys, and it's too small for these guys. Okay, so it kind of dances around in there. So what I did is actually, in this hole right there in the middle, I actually bored this out. I think it was a 6mm, and I'm able to kind of push this into position, and it stays there nice and sturdy. And you think, great, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to be able to do my soldering really, really easy now, and I'm not going to have any problems. However, I did have one problem, and that is that this jig, being all aluminium, acts like a huge heat sink, and it took me forever to get any heat onto the connector. And even the heat that I managed to transfer wouldn't hang around for very long, because it all just went out to the aluminium jig. Now, I didn't realize that this was acting as a huge heat sink until I went to pick it up and nearly burnt my fingers, because this thing got extremely hot. So it looks great. It may work fantastic on some of the like plastic connectors because it's got this little thing here that you can undo and maybe put some Deans or some XT60s here. But for these ones here that use like bullets, I don't know. I'm not a fan, so I tried to use it once. It didn't really work out for me. So I've put it aside and I've gone back to my old method, which is to use this. This is a pair of pliers with an elastic band on the end. Obviously the elastic band to help keep the pliers closed. So essentially what I do is I'll just open it up like that, put my connector in there right at the tip, and that's it. Okay, I can now do my soldering without any problems. Because it's being held by kind of like the jagged teeth of the plier, there's not enough contact there for the pliers to act as a heat sink. So they only just get mildly warm. You don't really need, you can touch them after you've done 2 or 3 bullets and they're only just mildly warm. So it's not a problem. And I get really good heat transfer on my connectors, which is what I want. So we'll pop this guy aside and we'll move on to another set of pliers that I use, which are these ones here. Now the reason why I use these is so that I can obviously grip the wires when I'm doing my soldering, because you're going to be transferring a lot of heat onto these cables. Holding it with your fingers, you'd only be able to hold it for so long before you leave some of the skin behind. So you do want to make sure that you have something to grip these wires with as you transfer heat around. Alright, so that's another one. We'll pop these guys aside, and now last but not least is of course the most important ingredient. You need your solder. Now there's different types of wire out there. I know a lot of you will have your own preferred brands, and look, I'll pick these up from a local store. I don't even know what they are or how much they were, to be honest with you. I know this one was probably a little bit expensive, but essentially what we're looking at here are 2 different types. You've got ones they've got lead in them, like this one here, and you've got ones that are lead free. So you've got this one which actually says they're lead free. Now I didn't know the difference between the two until I actually used them myself. The lead based one is obviously the easiest one to use and the one that you really want to go for. However, the downside with this one is that it produces a lot of fumes, so you got to make sure that you're in a ventilated area, or perhaps you're even using some sort of mask, because the fumes that come out of this can be a little bit toxic, so just keep that in mind. This one is lead free, so a lot less fumes, but a lot harder to work with. This thing is a pain to work with. Even using the iron at the same temperature between the two, this one's a breeze to work with. You can solder and unsolder very easily. This one makes life very, very hard. However, I do still use this one, and I'm going to show you how I do it when we actually start working on it, because I actually mix the two up, and it gives me a really nice solid connection, like solid solder, I guess. It almost turns into cement, to be honest with you. So I still use it, especially in my XT150s. I don't use it so much in my smaller connectors, but in my XT150s I like to use this one just to make sure that they never come apart. So enough yapping, let's clear the bench here and let's get to work, because there is a little bit for me to show you, and I want to make sure that you guys follow along so you know exactly what to do if you want to do it the same way I do. Alright, so obviously the first thing we're going to need to do here is cut these cables off. Now we need to be very, very careful when we're cutting off battery cables, because the last thing you want to do is have them touch. So you don't want that, because you get a really nice fireworks, big spark coming out of the cables, and you may even damage your battery. So you need to be very careful when doing this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little kind of warning thingy here. We're going to get rid of this guy, if I can get my scissors in here, and get rid of that. Alright, so there we go. Now, doesn't really matter which one you want to cut first, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to start here with my black one. I'm going to flip my scissors around so I get the, you can see the little cavity there gets in there. I'm going to make these a little bit long, so I'm going to go right up against the connector. I'm going to push down, and we get a nice clean cut that you see there. Now, before I cut that next wire, alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of an elastic band, just like that. I'm going to wrap it a couple of times around this battery, and I'm going to keep my cable strapped to the actual casing itself. So that way it's not flopping around, and it's not going to be touching anything that has anything to do with this red cable here at the moment. So alternatively, another easier and I suppose safer way to do this is to swap these two around, so I can actually have it like that. All right, put that one in there, and we can work on this one. So I suppose let's do that. Let's do it that way, because I know some people will probably comment on it, so let's do it this way. The one thing that I like to do though is I actually like to measure up my cables and make sure that they're exactly the same length when I cut them, but for the sake of the exercise, and given it doesn't really matter if they're a couple of mil out, we're going to leave it as it is. Alright, so now we're going to get our little cutters here. So we've got these little strippers and wire strippers. Get your minds out of the gutter, please. So I'm just going to measure out probably about, I don't know, about 6-7 mil roughly. And I'm kind of just rotating here as I kind of plan this out, and we're going to go and just push, and hopefully we got our wire stripped very, very easily. You can see there, came out real easy. So we'll get rid of that, and we're going to give this a bit of a twist, and I like to twist them pretty hard, make sure that it almost twists beyond where you've cut the cable. So that way it gives you a really nice kind of solid, I don't know, bond with your solder as well. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to get my my pliers here. I'm going to just grab the cable just like that. I'm going to put it down just like that with the cable kind of facing up. I'm going to see if I can do this on camera here, because I have not done this, especially from this angle. And I'm actually using a new iron which I've not used before. I actually picked this one up from Hobby King as well, and I'll give you guys a bit of a close-up of it so that you can see what iron I'm using. Now I like to use my chisel tips. I don't know if you call them chisel tips, they're like a knifey sort of end tip. I like to use these. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put my tip kind of leaning up against the actual cable itself. I'm going to feed some wire into there, and you know what I might do? I might actually try and do a bit of a close-up of this. So just bear with me while I fix up the camera a bit, and I'll try and give you a bit of a close-up of what I'm doing here so you can see a lot better. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this a little bit better now. So I'm going to get my iron here, and I'm going to move the iron and kind of lean it up against the cable, and then I'm going to feed some of this solder kind of onto the edge of the iron there, and you can kind of see the fumes kind of coming off it maybe. So if you hear me blowing, it's just me blowing kind of the fumes away from me. So the reason why I'm sort of putting the solder on here is to get as much contact area with the cable as I possibly can to warm it up. So once it's got a bit of heat to it, I should be able to melt the solder kind of straight from the top of the cable, and the cable itself will kind of suck the solder straight through onto the bottom. So let me see if I can do this, if it'll work for me. Hopefully the iron won't let me down. So just trying to get some heat on here. So just making sure I keep a nice strong contact with that wire. And you can see now it's melting from the top. So I'm able to kind of just feed the solder straight from the top, and pretty much anywhere I touch that wire, the solder would actually melt and will get sucked in to the middle of the cable there. So that looks like it's plenty. I've actually got a little bit of a drop on there of the solder, so plenty of soldering on that cable at the moment. And that's good to go straight into the plug. So let's move on to the plug, and I'll show you exactly how I do this one. Okay, so now for the plug itself, make sure you're doing it on the right one. Well, not that it matters, but just make sure you're doing this in some sort of order. So at the moment I've got the male plug here, which goes onto the black wire of my battery. I'm basically just going to shove the soldering iron into the middle here. Just put it straight in there, and I'm going to just feed some of this cable and just get a whole bunch of it in there. And once I've got a bit, I'll actually move the iron around, because what I want to do is I want to kind of create a little bit of a base for the other soldering wire to go in. So as my connector now is getting a little bit warm, I'll just feed a little bit more in there, and that should just about do it. Yep, that's done it. So you can see that I've got a little bit of solder in there. Everything's nicely melted. All right, so that's what it looks like. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be feeding in some of this thicker stuff. So I'm actually going to put the iron on the connector itself. I'm going to sit it right on there, and this is transferring heat to the connector. And then I'm just going to feed this guy in, hopefully. There we go. So this is actually mixing in with the other lead base solder wire. And there we have it. So now that's got a nice little puddle of solder in there. All right. So I can still put my iron right in the middle, and it's all nicely mixed up. And there we go. So I don't fill it up too much. I leave a little bit kind of short of the top, because once your wire goes in, obviously, and then the wire's got solder on it as well, then that's going to fill up quite a bit. So let's get the wire now, and we'll move on to the next stage, which is to put the wire onto the connector. Okay, now before you actually put your cable onto the connector itself, make sure that you feed the sleeve straight through the wire first. Make sure you feed this through first, and you do the right one, not the wrong one, and then you are able to kind of be able to put it on there. So I'm going to grip this with my pliers here, and you can see I'm able to sort of bend it through and get it in there like so. So it's kind of solidified a little bit at the moment, but we'll get to that. I'm sure we'll do this very quickly. I'll just position my pliers here so you guys can see what's going on. All right, so I need to heat this up again. So we're going to put my iron on top of my connector, and I'm just going to rest it there until it actually transfers the heat and melts everything. You can see that it's changing, it's melting everything. You can see the solder actually softening up. Right, and there we go. That is pretty much all melted now. And this is the part that took me forever to do in the when I had the connector in the jig. I just couldn't transfer the heat over to the connector quick enough because it was just dissipating through the actual jig itself. All right, so now I'm going to grab my wire, and I'm going to try and see if I can do this without blocking the view for you here. I'm just going to jam this guy straight in, put it up. I'm going to run the wire kind of against the iron, and I'm going to put it into the solder kind of slowly. Put it in there slowly, because what you want to do is you want not just the solder to be soft enough to accept the plug, but you want the solder on the the solder to be soft enough to accept the cable, but you want the solder on the cable to melt and fuse with the solder that you've put in the plug, if that makes a little bit of sense. So I'm going to move this guy around a little bit, and you can see that everything is like liquidy and everything's melted. I'm just really letting it sit there for a bit while everything kind of mixes, and then I let go, and boom, it's done. It's solidified, and that is good to go. So I'm going to show you the final product here. I'm going to try not to burn myself, so I'll try and hold the plug up here with some pliers, because I'm sure this will be really hot. I'm not even going to try and touch it with my fingers. If the camera would focus on the plug instead of the rug, that would be great. And there you have it. There is the plug, all sorted up to the cable. All right, so that's what it looks like. There's plenty of solder in there. I probably stripped it a little bit too long, to be honest with you. I could have done a little bit less, but that's probably only a millimeter or so. You don't want the cable to be into the connector itself, because you do need the exposed cable there so that your iron can sort of melt everything together. But essentially that's how it's done. So once this is all complete, sorry, I know my fingers are in the way here, I'll bring this up here and show you again. All you need to do is kind of just run your sleeve straight through, all right, and it looks like that. And now give it one great big pull and hopefully we'll hear a click. All right, you ready? There it is. All right, that's the click you want. I'm able to sort of rotate the connector as well, but obviously the plug stays fixed, and that means it's not going anywhere, and that's one of my connectors all done. All right, so that's it. Now I'm just going to repeat the same process with the red one, and we are pretty much done here. Alright, so that's how I do my XT150 connectors. Now, if you guys enjoyed the video, if you got some useful tips out of it, then you know, please be sure to give the video a like, leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, please do so. I'll do my best to get back to you. Sorry if this was a little bit long or anything like that, but I kind of wanted to give a beginner out there some information on how to do these types of connectors. And hopefully you got some information here to help you out, because I know that my friend Reed from Urban RCLA, who hates doing soldering, he's had a lot of trouble in the past. I figured I would do this video. This video is kind of aimed towards him and people like him who don't like to do this sort of thing. But as you can see, it's not very hard at all. If you have the right tools and you have the right know-how, they're pretty easy to do. And these connectors, they're not going to go anywhere. They're in here nice and tight, and they work perfectly. So you can use the same sort of method for a lot of the other connectors that exist out there, but if you want me to do another video like this for perhaps the XT90s or the XT60s, let me know, and I'll perhaps put another one up in the near future. But that's it from me. Thank you all very much for watching. Please be sure to check out the video description for links to the connectors and some of the tools that I used here, which will, I got a lot of this from Hobby King, and also there'll be a link in the video description for my Facebook page. It'll help you keep a couple of steps ahead of what goes on here on YouTube. Thank you again, and I'll speak to you next time.